This is a story I haven't thought about in years, and for good reason. My friends and I used to love exploring abandoned places. Growing up in New Jersey, there were plenty of spots within driving distance to keep us entertained for hours. A lot of what we did wasn't exactly smart in hindsight, mostly old, decaying buildings and empty warehouses, but sometimes we'd find something a little more interesting. One place we had our eyes on for a while was an abandoned middle school about 30 minutes away. I won't mention the name for privacy reasons, but anyone familiar with North Jersey urban exploring probably knows which one I mean. We'd seen plenty of photos online and figured it was time to check it out. It was late summer, and we were getting tired of our usual routine, playing basketball in my backyard or driving around aimlessly. I can't remember who suggested it, but the idea came up spontaneously. There were 4 of us that night, me, Yuri, Frank, and Freddie. Frank and I were into graffiti, so we packed a few cans of black and white spray paint. The rest of my bag held a couple of leftover Roman candles from the 4th of July. Our usual plan for these things was simple: explore, get to the roof, light off some fireworks, and get out before the cops showed up. That night wasn't supposed to be any different. Yuri drove, parking a few blocks from the school before we walked the rest of the way. To our surprise, the fence had already been cut, so we didn't have to climb. The school was massive, bigger than we'd imagined from pictures, and it would take forever to see everything, a plus for us since we got bored easily. Frank led the way through the gap in the fence, followed by Yuri, me, and Freddie in the back. Freddie was fearless, so he volunteered to go last. We found an unboarded door and stepped inside. Even with our flashlights, the place was unnerving, like your childhood school stripped bare and left to rot. The hallways were silent, lined with exposed wires, cracked tiles, and broken furniture. We clicked on our flashlights and started down the main hall. We all had ridiculously powerful flashlights, something we weirdly took pride in. Mine had cost me $60 and could light up an entire room. It was bright enough to blind someone for a few seconds if they looked at it wrong. Pricey, but worth it. The walls were covered in graffiti, some good, most bad. Frank and I paused occasionally to admire a few tags, but mostly we kept moving. I'll spare you most of the details, but the building was fascinating in its decay. The auditorium, with its collapsing stage and rows of rotting seats, was especially cool. We did a quick loop through the basement, easily the most ruined part of the school. We didn't linger long, partly because it looked unsafe, but mostly because my friends were getting creeped out. One room had a huge pentagram painted on the floor, which wasn't comforting but wasn't unusual either. Anyone into urban exploring knows those pop up everywhere. Eventually, we made our way up to the 2nd floor. One classroom had an untouched white wall, basically a blank canvas. Frank and I grinned and started throwing paint while Yuri and Freddie said they'd explore and find a way to the roof. They disappeared down a dark hallway while we kept tagging. After finishing our piece, Frank started on another section, and I wandered off to admire some other graffiti nearby. Maybe 5 minutes later, I heard Frank shouting angrily, asking if I was messing with him. I told him I had no idea what he meant, and he accused me of taking his bag. I swore I hadn't moved it, I'd been in the hallway the whole time. He believed me eventually and muttered that it must have been Freddie, which honestly fit his sense of humor. We searched the room but found nothing. The bag was gone. Without it, we couldn't keep tagging, so we decided to find the others, assuming they were already on the roof. We climbed as far as the stairs went but found no roof access. As we wandered the upper floor, I stepped into a small side room and froze. On the wall was another pentagram like the one in the basement, but freshly painted, the paint still dripping. In the corner sat Frank's missing bag. Frank came in behind me, spotted it immediately, and shouted, "What the hell is wrong with him?" I didn't answer. Even as a prank, it felt like something Freddie wouldn't do. We left quickly, walking in silence through the hallway, just wanting to find the others. That's when we heard fast footsteps approaching, Freddie and Yuri, frantically motioning for us to follow. We didn't ask questions, we just ran. If someone tells you to run, you don't wait around. Yuri tried to explain while we were sprinting, but I could barely hear him over the echoing noise. All I gathered was that we were running from someone, maybe several people. The building was a maze, and we struggled to find our way back to the exit. Eventually, we stopped to catch our breath at a corner in what felt like another wing entirely. We agreed to find a random stairwell, go down, and hopefully reach the ground floor. It didn't sound like anyone was behind us anymore, so we moved quietly. We finally found stairs and descended. On what we guessed was the ground floor, we started down a hallway, thinking we were safe, until we heard a sharp hissing sound from ahead. It was steady, deliberate, like someone imitating a cat. We froze. Then a deep voice spoke from the dark, saying clearly, "I should have cut you when I had the chance." We didn't hesitate. We bolted. This time, I could hear multiple sets of footsteps chasing us, along with shouting, threats, curses, people yelling that they'd kill us and had all the exits covered. It was the most terrified I've ever been. Just when I thought we'd have to hide upstairs, Yuri took a lucky turn, and suddenly the original door was in sight. We burst outside, ran through the fence, and didn't stop until we were in the car. Yuri sped off, and though we glanced back at the building, it was too dark to make anything out. As we drove away, Freddy told us what had happened. He said that after failing to find roof access, he and Yuri had gone down a floor to look for us. Freddy heard a strange metallic clinking from one of the rooms and thought it was us. When they looked inside, they saw 3 cloaked figures sitting in a circle, hunched over something on the floor, like they were playing a game with marbles or stones. When the figures noticed them, they scrambled up and started chasing. Freddy and Yuri ran back up, trying to lose them, and that's when they found us. None of it made much sense. The biggest question for me was why they'd mess with us by taking Frank's bag if they were truly dangerous. Freddy's theory was that they assumed we'd get lost inside and decided to toy with us first. Yuri thought the room with the pentagram was meant for something ritualistic, maybe a sacrifice. I figured they hadn't been chasing us but had gone downstairs to cut us off. If there were 3 that Yuri and Freddy saw, and 1 messing with us, that meant at least 4 people were in there. It just didn't add up. I know it doesn't sound as terrifying when I explain it now, but if you'd been there, you'd understand. We never went back, and as far as I know, that building is still standing. This happened a little over 5 years ago. I had just moved into my first home, a place I no longer live in. At the time, I was coming off a long stretch in a cramped downtown Spokane apartment. It had a convenient location, sure, but I was tired of the endless traffic noise, crowded sidewalks, and the sense that I could practically hear my neighbors breathing through the walls. I wasn't a kid anymore, and I wanted peace and quiet. The house I ended up renting was a small, 1-story place on the outskirts of a rural town, tucked behind a patch of pine trees with a narrow gravel driveway leading up to it. There wasn't much to it, 2 small bedrooms, an outdated kitchen, and a cramped bathroom, but it was calm and quiet. My nearest neighbors were far enough away to be out of sight and definitely out of earshot. Finding work in that area was frustrating, but I eventually landed a job. Between the long hours and exhaustion, I didn't have much of a routine. I mostly lived off takeout, kept to myself, and didn't really have a social life, which I honestly didn't mind. This particular night took place in late October. I had just gotten home from work around 9:45 after one of those mentally draining shifts where all you want is food and silence. I kicked off my boots, changed clothes, and ordered Chinese from a spot I'd used before. Out there, no delivery apps serviced the area, so your food options depended entirely on which restaurants were willing to drive out to you. Around 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I remember thinking, wow, that was fast. I went to the front door and looked through the peephole. A man stood there in a hoodie and jeans, hands stuffed in his pockets, but he wasn't holding any food. No bag, no receipt, nothing that looked remotely like a delivery driver. I should have realized something was off, but my brain was on autopilot. Against my better judgment, I cracked the door slightly, leaving the chain on, and asked if he was delivering my order. He paused, then nodded, saying he just wanted to double-check the order before grabbing it from his car. That's when it clicked. I told him that if he didn't bring the food to the door, I was calling the police. He muttered something under his breath and turned, walking down the driveway until he disappeared into the darkness. My stomach was in knots, but I stayed quiet and shut the door. I locked it and called the restaurant to confirm. The manager told me the order hadn't even left yet. That's when it truly hit me, whoever that was had no business being there. I called the non-emergency police line to report it. The dispatcher told me to stay alert and said they'd notify patrols in the area. It wasn't urgent enough for a direct response, but at least it was logged. I figured the guy had probably left anyway. About 20 minutes later, the real delivery driver showed up. I took the food, paid, and tried to move on. Around 11:30, I was sitting in the living room with the lights off, watching TV, when I heard a faint scraping sound coming from the back of the house. I muted the TV and froze, listening. After a few tense seconds, it came again, definitely from the back door. My heart started pounding. Then the doorknob jiggled. Someone was testing it. I immediately called 911 in a whisper and told them what was happening. I grabbed a kitchen knife and locked myself in my bedroom, trying to stay silent. After about 15 agonizing minutes, I heard an officer call out from the front door. I ran to let him in. The police searched the property and nearby area but found no one. One of them pointed out fresh pry marks near the back door. Someone had tried wedging something under the lock, probably a flathead screwdriver or similar tool. I gave them my statement and connected it to the earlier encounter. They said they'd increase patrols for a while, but beyond that, there wasn't much they could do. It wasn't the most comforting answer, but I accepted it. Sleep didn't come easily that night, but the next few days passed quietly. I told myself that guy wouldn't risk coming back after I'd already involved the police twice, and he didn't. Then, a few nights later, I woke up after midnight to the sound of sirens. They weren't close, but they were loud enough to wake me. I looked out the window and saw 3 police cruisers racing past my house, lights flashing. Relieved it wasn't about me, I went back to bed, figuring it was some domestic disturbance nearby. About 20 minutes after I fell asleep, though, there was a knock at my door. Groggy, I got up, checked the peephole, and saw 2 uniformed officers on the porch. When I opened the door, one of them asked if I recognized someone they just detained a few streets over. He showed me a photo on his phone, and it was him. The same man who'd come to my door pretending to deliver food. I confirmed it immediately, my voice shaking. They told me he'd just been caught trying to break into another home nearby and thought it might be connected to my earlier report. The officers assured me I didn't have to worry about him anymore, and I thanked them. That was the last I ever heard of it. They never followed up, and I never asked. I was just relieved it was over. Not long after that, I decided to move out, partly for peace of mind, partly because the isolation had started to wear me down. This happened just a few weeks ago, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since. My name's Catherine, I'm 24, and I'm about to start my second year of law school at NYU. For anyone who doesn't know, your first year is brutal. I don't think I slept more than 4 hours a night from September through May. So when summer finally came around, I promised myself I'd actually enjoy it while I could. That meant going out a lot, especially on weekends. I was back home for the summer for a few reasons. It was cheaper, all my hometown friends were around, and it just gave me that comforting sense of familiarity you only get from being home. Most Saturdays, we ended up at the same handful of bars a few towns over. There's one in particular that's always packed, and that's where I was with my friend Jackie the night everything happened. I'll admit something that probably doesn't sound great. I have this habit of acting a little ditzy when I meet guys at bars. Nothing over the top, just enough to let them make assumptions, and trust me, they always do. I don't know if this is just bar culture in general, but the guys I meet always seem to assume every girl they talk to is brain dead. I'm definitely not a genius, but I'm far from that. Somehow, though, pretending to be dumb is kind of entertaining. I can't really explain why, it's just funny to see how they react. And there's a certain satisfaction in flipping the script once I get bored of the act. Jackie and I had just grabbed our drinks and were scanning the crowd when two guys started talking to us. We later found out their names were Sebastian and Luke. They seemed normal enough, decent looking, confident, not immediately creepy, and no obvious red flags, which was always a good start. Jackie hit it off with Luke right away, so I figured I'd stick it out with Sebastian. He wasn't bad, actually kind of charming. We ended up talking for a surprisingly long time, which was rare since most of these bar conversations die out within minutes. Jackie isn't exactly what you'd call warm and friendly, so the fact that she was still engaged said a lot. At one point, she grabbed my arm and said she needed to go to the bathroom. As we were leaving, Sebastian asked if we wanted another round. I told him we'd both take rum and cokes, simple, standard, hard to mess up. In the bathroom, Jackie told me she was thinking about going home with Luke, preferably soon. I was honestly shocked. I'm usually the one making impulsive decisions like that, not her. And she tried convincing me that Luke could be the one, which made me laugh internally, but I didn't say anything. It wasn't worth arguing. I just shrugged and told her to do what she wanted. When we came back out, I noticed the guys across the bar, but something was different. They weren't laughing or chatting like before. They were standing still, talking quietly with these blank expressions. Something about it unsettled me, and I couldn't shake it. The second we got close, their behavior changed again, like someone flipped a switch. They were suddenly back to their easygoing selves. Luke pushed 2 drinks toward us without saying much. I noticed there were actually 4 drinks total, 2 rum and cokes and 2 bright yellow frozen ones. They definitely didn't look like drinks most guys would order. So, I decided to test them a little. I smiled sweetly and pointed at the odd drinks, asking what they were. Sebastian said they were piña coladas, which was random, to say the least. I tilted my head and teased, "You sure those aren't too girly for you? Wouldn't want anyone catching you sipping them." Before they could react, I slid our rum and cokes across the table and swapped them with the frozen drinks. I raised mine and took a slow sip, giving Sebastian a wink. Jackie followed my lead, clearly confused but playing along. Sebastian just stared at me for a second before smirking and saying, "Touché." Then he started drinking the rum and coke. Luke did too. That actually made me relax a little. Everything felt normal again, and Jackie was making it pretty obvious she was ready to leave. Luke caught on and suggested we all go back to his place for a nightcap. At that point, I wasn't worried anymore. If they were inviting us over, surely they didn't suspect we'd noticed anything. We took an Uber to his apartment, not fancy, just a small, clean second-floor unit. The place felt a bit too minimal though, like he'd just moved in. Luke grabbed some White Claws from the fridge and put on some music. For a while, everything seemed perfectly fine. The guys were talking, laughing, even starting to sober up, or so it seemed. Then, out of nowhere, their behavior shifted. They started slurring, mumbling, and laughing in this weird, detached way. Within minutes, both of them just passed out on the couch. My heart sank. Watching it happen confirmed what I had suspected, they'd spiked our drinks. Jackie didn't realize it right away since she was much drunker than I was. She tried to wake Luke up, but I pulled her back, telling her to calm down. I reminded her that I had switched the drinks and said I thought that's why they were out cold. She looked at me, eyes wide, whispering, "Oh my God," over and over. We sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what to do. I wanted to leave immediately, but Jackie wanted to look for proof, some kind of evidence. We glanced around, but it's not like we were detectives, and we had no idea what we were even looking for. After a few minutes, I convinced her to just drop it. We left and didn't look back. We never went to the police, not that night or afterward, and I know that probably sounds stupid, but without any proof, what could we really say? It's possible, I guess, that they'd just gotten too drunk too fast, but neither of us believes that. The part that still haunts me is how close we came to being in real danger. What kind of person drugs girls who are already willing to go home with them? It makes me think they were planning something even worse. And honestly, what confuses me most is why they'd invite us over if they knew they were about to pass out. Maybe they assumed the drugs wouldn't affect them as much because they were bigger, or maybe they just miscalculated, but either way, it's terrifying. This whole thing keeps replaying in my mind. I know it was reckless to let anyone else handle my drink, but I still can't wrap my head around how easily people will cross lines just to get what they want.